Hey guys, it's Mark. Hope the lighting is decent in here today. I wanted to do a little quickie live video here because I keep getting a lot of questions about pathological demand avoidance. That's technically not something that's in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, but it's a thing, kind of like Cassandra syndrome. It's not in the DSM-5, but it's still a thing, still exists. And so, as many of you know, and by the way, if you can't hear me, let me know in the chat. As many of you know, pathological demand avoidance is a term to use to describe a profile of autism where the person actively avoids everyday demands and expectations to sometimes an extreme extent. That could include avoiding tasks, social interactions, everyday routines, and so on. So again, even though it's not officially recognized as a separate diagnosis in the DSM-5, it is recognized in the National Autistic Society's Autism Spectrum Disorders, which is, I think it's called a Guide to Good Practice. So there's several traits that go with, I'm just going to call it PDA, pathological demand avoidance. Some traits of that would be high levels of anxiety, extreme need for control, difficulty with social communication. There's some obsessive behavior that comes with that. And of course, resisting and avoiding ordinary demands. An inability to cope with unexpected changes. Exhibiting passive resistance. Exhibiting superficial social skills. Difficulty with social imagination. And having some mood swings and impulsivity. And as I'm rattling off these traits, most of you are going, well, those sound like traits of ASD level 1, 2. So there is a huge crossover between ASD and PDA. So it makes sense to me why some NTYs that I run into want to say, well, he has pathological demand avoidance. Well, 75% of the traits of PDA are also ASD. So let's don't play diagnostician, okay? So let's look at some of these traits a little deeper. So I said anxiety, right? So what are some of the causes of anxiety? Well, chronic stress due to work, school, marriage problems, traumatic experiences, abuse, accidents, genetic factors, medications. So, lack of sleep, poor nutrition, substance abuse, all of these things contribute to anxiety. So there's a host of reasons why somebody is anxious. And just because they have high anxiety doesn't necessarily mean they have ASD or PDA, but high anxiety does come with ASD and PDA. So there's a huge crossover between PDA and ASD. And that's kind of the purpose of this video, to make the distinction between the two. We're specifically looking at PDA today. I said another trait of PDA is that they have a high extreme need for control. And there's many reasons for that. I'm not making this. If somebody has a high need to control circumstances, it could be from past experiences where they felt powerless or out of control, leading them to overcompensate in their current relationships and situations, or it could be driven by a fear of uncertainty and the unknown. And it could also be the result of an overwhelming desire for safety and security. And I've often said that people with ASD live a life of unpredictability. If he or she has ASD, they're going to have some emotions blindness, some executive function deficits, and some anxiety. We could also throw in weak central coherence, problems with prediction, sensory sensitivities. All of these things create a bunch of unpredictability for that individual. What are they going to do if they feel like there's so much unpredictability 24/7. They're going to try to create as much predictability as possible. What's that going to look like? They're going to come off as very rigid, stubborn. They're going to come off as very rigid, stubborn. They're going to hate to have their routine jacked with. They thrive on structure, and they don't like change, especially surprise change. So people with ASD do have a strong need for safety and security, only because they live in a world of unpredictability. Another trait that I had mentioned was problems with social communication, and that happens for a bunch of reasons. If he or she has ASD level 1, they're going to be low in social and emotional intelligence, although they're going to be high in general IQ and high in logical intelligence. I'm not calling them dumb. Most of them are smarter than me. But they're going to be lacking in the social skills and emotional skills department. And that means they're going to have trouble interpreting social cues. They're going to have difficulty initiating and maintaining conversations. They're going to have difficulty with emotional reciprocity. So identifying the root cause of social communication problems is a big deal, because it's not going to be a one size fits all. There's numerous reasons for that. The primary one being low social and emotional intelligence. That comes with ASD level 1. In fact, I've often said that ASD is a disorder such that the person's social and emotional brain is underdeveloped, which means that their emotional age is much, much younger than their chronological age. I had mentioned obsessive behavior. That can happen for a bunch of reasons. So that's another trait of PDA, exhibiting excessive behaviors, obsessive behaviors. That could be the result of obsessive compulsive disorder, anxiety disorder, depression, bunch of reasons why that happens. Some people may develop obsessive behavior as a way to cope with stress and trauma, and also certain personality traits such as perfectionism may contribute to obsessive behavior and even OCD. People on the autism spectrum tend to be very perfectionistic about a small number of things, but if they don't have all their ducks in a row, they may end up procrastinating because they want it done perfectly, and if they don't feel like they're prepared to do it perfectly, they'll procrastinate, and in some cases never get it done. I mentioned that they avoid ordinary demands that neurotypicals would not even think twice about following through with. So there's a bunch of reasons for that. One common reason is they feel overwhelmed or stressed, and this is one other thing on their plate, and it's just too much for them to handle because they're already high anxiety, right? They already have their own agenda planned out, right? They've already have their schedule set up for the day, and you want to throw an extra thing in. Sometimes it's just enough to crack their brain. In some cases, people also avoid ordinary demands because they feel unmotivated or disengaged. It's like, I don't really see any need to do that. It doesn't even fall within my radar. They just don't see any value in completing those tasks. And I know that piece right there irritates the shit out of a lot of NTYs. And also, some people may avoid ordinary demands because they just lack the confidence in their ability to complete a thing, or they feel fear of failure. Okay. Let's see. One of the other traits I had mentioned was they don't like, another trait of PDA, but also ASD, is they don't like unexpected changes. It disrupts their sense of normalcy. It disrupts their routine. It disrupts their sense of being able to control circumstances. It basically puts a crack in their pre-planned structure. So it could be a sudden job loss, a health problem, a major life event. So unexpected changes are difficult for people with PDA and ASD because it raises their anxiety. And anxiety, by the way, if you want a definition of that, it's I'm afraid of something and I'm not really sure what it is. Okay? We probably should make the distinction between fear and anxiety. Fear is I'm afraid of something and I know what it is. I got to have a root canal tomorrow or something. Anxiety is I'm afraid of something and I can't quite put my finger on it. We're back to the concept of unpredictability again now. So one of the main reasons why unexpected changes can be so challenging for people on the spectrum is that it requires them to adapt to a new circumstance quickly. And people with ASD are slow processors. They don't adapt to new things that pop up quickly. Okay. So let's see. Another thing that I mentioned was they can exhibit passive resistance. And this can happen because they feel powerless to effect change through a more assertive means, or they may fear the potential consequences of more direct action. In other words, they may favor being passive. In other cases, they may be making a deliberate choice to resist in a more subtle or indirect way to avoid confrontation, right? How many times has that happened in your neurodiverse marriage? Another one I mentioned is some of them PDA. Not so much with people with ASD will exhibit superficial social skills. So there's several reasons for that. One of the reasons might be that they lack empathy, which causes them to kind of be out of touch with other people's needs and emotions. Another reason to exhibit superficial social skills would be they're more focused on personal goals than building connections with others. And then we're back to the concept of hyper-focusing on a special interest for extended periods of time there. And some people that exhibit superficial social skills simply suffer with social anxiety or fear of rejection, which leads them to kind of put up a facade of confidence and charm, which I know you want to call that masking. Okay, fine. The other trait of PDA is, what did we say? Social imagination, struggling with social imagination. And this comes with the package with ASD and also ADHD. So let's see, I think we mentioned mood swings and we also mentioned impulsivity. So mood swings, that can be hormonal, certain medications, substance abuse, anxiety, depression, bipolar, personality disorders, thyroid problems, neurological disorder. So there's a bunch of reasons for mood swings. And having wild mood swings is definitely a trait of PDA. We also said impulsivity was one. And so that's could be the factors there could be ADHD, bipolar, substance abuse, borderline personality, antisocial personality. So impulsivity can be a learned behavior too. It can be a coping mechanism too, coping mechanism for stress. So suffice it to say that there is a huge overlap between pathological demand avoidance and autism spectrum disorder, but they're two different things. And sometimes NTs, spouses want to label it PDA, like he's purposely being defiant and oppositional. No, there's a bunch of reasons behind the curtain why that's going on. Bunch of reasons why your ASD spouse is avoiding ordinary demands. And it's usually the case, and in summary here, that he feels overwhelmed and anxious when faced with certain expectations or tasks that fall outside of his special interests or that he was surprised with that makes him difficult for him to deal with yet another thing thrown on his plate. He probably does, or she has a strong need for control and autonomy. I've often said people on the spectrum are very independent. Many of them are solo players who just happen to be married. And so sometimes they resist demands purely to assert their independence. So, but I think the main reason, based on working with these individuals for, I've lost track of the years, 10, 12, 15, they avoid demands not because they're purposely trying to be oppositional or passive aggressive. It's a way to deal with their anxiety or to deal with them not having extra anxiety. So if I had to summarize this thing in one sentence, it would be this: they avoid extra demands because their head is already decided on the day's agenda, and they have one special interest that they can hyper focus on for extended periods of time. And so when you come along as the NT spouse with an ordinary demand or request, and I know you think, well, that's not much. Well, if you can see that in his mind, his plate's already full, and he doesn't want unpredictability. He's not too interested in stuff that falls outside of his special interest. Then it starts to make sense. I'm not trying to justify it. I'm not saying it's good, bad, right, or wrong. I'm just trying to shed some light on it so you'll know what's going on behind the curtain with this PDA business. So I probably over-explained it at this point. Okay. I think with that, I think I've explained it enough. By the way, if you have any questions about it or you need further explanation, then just put it in the comments below this video here. Okay. All right. Thanks for listening, and stay in touch. Okay.